This is Erma Grego from Senior Perspective. Today we're going back to when Peters Township first started telephone service. The first place was on the Joe McMurray property across from the building we are going to talk about now. At that time, it was a one-person switchboard. Perhaps later some of my guests can tell us a bit more. My guests today are, over here is Ivan
Forgy.
Okay, Ivan Forgy and Tom McMillan.
Milligan.
Milligan. Oh, I'm really doing good here, aren't I? And Ruth Stoltz, Mae McMurray, Martha Latimore, and Dolly Wolf Gorcello. Okay. Perhaps we can get started on some of this. What was the date that the first telephone came to Peters? Martha, perhaps you could tell us that.
Was long before my time, and it was up on the hill by Joe McMurray's house. That's where the first telephone office was.
Okay.
And then it was later moved down to where the hairdressers and the, what is that, the ice cream place.
Yeah, okay. And then you told about where the phone company was first located. Was up across the road then?
Yeah, across the road, up on the hill.
Okay, well, do anybody want to make any comments on any of that? Any of you fellas?
That was before our time, too.
Okay. Can anybody explain how the first system worked, like the party lines and the private lines? Any of you fellas want to comment on that?
They were around.
You weren't around then?
Well, private line and party line. Private line meant there was one customer on that line. A party line had the manual office that we're talking about now had 8 parties on each line. I think before that, Martha said there was something like maybe 16 parties on a line.
On one line,
That was a rural line.
Yeah.
That was a rural line.
And
Was that the one where you used to rang at home or something? Or was that where you rang at the switchboard? Or
No, there was some of them that was, yeah, that was when we were on the old Magneto board. We had high, but we did, even when we got over on the other board, we had good many on the lines until we got more positions open.
Well, Ivan, she mentioned something about a Magneto board. You were going to show us something about how that worked?
Yeah, this is
perhaps
the Magneto phone in the back here. And I just wanted to show you how it rang here. And here's the...
Ring them a 1 and a 2. Ring 1, 2. No, that was 3.
Oh. Martha, I'm forgetting how it's ringing.
One long and 2 shorts.
Okay, one long.
Yeah.
How's that?
Then that person would know it was their ring and they would answer it in their
Well,
home.
they picked it up anyway. That's how they got the news. Everybody picked it up.
Everybody answered when it rang.
well, on a party line, you actually rang all the other parties on your line. You didn't have to go through an operator.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
on these.
Right.
And a Magneto line had a local, what was called local battery. It was a dry cell battery. As long as the battery lasted, you could use your phone. When the battery wore out, you had to get another one.
Oh.
Yeah, I think I'm nervous.
Anna Mae, perhaps you could tell us how many lines an operator could work at one time, well, when they were on duty.
They could work all lines. As long as the signal come in, they could answer any signal.
Well, then you were positioned and you could go to the right or the left and then in front like or something? Is that how
Yes.
that would work?
Uh-huh.
Okay, Ruth, maybe you could you're falling asleep there, Ruth.
No, I'm wide awake.
What was the pay scale for your early operators?
Well, when I started, I made 25 cents an hour. Of course, it went up later on. That was my starting wage.
25 cents an hour.
What year was that then, Ruth?
Well,
I'm going to tell you.
we got a raise and we made $10 a week.
So, well, I remember too.
That was my first paycheck, was $10.
$10.
$10 for a whole week now, imagine that.
And how far that went, though.
Yes, really. Uh-huh. Well, I am also a telephone employee, but I'm the one that would send out the bills. And my first paycheck I worked in Pittsburgh, was $25 for the week. And, I mean, I had to pay for bus fare and everything else, and so...
You weren't much better off.
No, that's right. Like on the old-time movies, you see operators listening in, then spreading the news. We talked a little bit about that. And was that very typical of what was going on in the neighborhoods? Was people would listen in so they could get the news?
Well, you could even listen in your own homes.
Well, yeah. Then that's whenever you were able to ring up your own neighbors and everything then. How were those lines set up that they could do that from their homes? I mean, do you remember or anything about that?
You mean listen in?
I mean, if you didn't have to get the operator, how would it go through?
Well, like your magnetophones, you had your local battery, which was used for talking, and really each phone was its own phone company. And if there were 8 or 10 or 12 persons on that line, it was just like one big happy family.
You could only call the ones on your own line.
Yeah.
You had to call the operator to get another line.
Yeah.
But then it went out to the wires on the poles then or
Yeah,
something?
everything was copper wire out on the cross arms on the poles. Everything was out in front of on the road or down along the fields or that. So.
Is that where that crossbar was, like up on the top of the telephone poles? Is that what you're talking
The
about?
cross arm, yes. There would be bare copper wire running along there.
See, when Ivan turned that crank on this magnetophone, everybody on that line heard that ring.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
And if they knew, they probably knew each other's rings, a long and a short.
Long and pretty short.
Some of them might have been more interesting than others, so they'd just stay on the line.
Ivan and Tom, what's the greatest breakthrough in the phone industry in the last 50 years? Tom?
Well, unfortunately, was the day that office cut over and became electronic office. The voice with a smile was gone, and that's sadly missed. But in today's world, you just couldn't hire enough operators to handle the volume of calls that are passed through today. But yeah, that's probably been the biggest breakthrough.
The personal touch.
It's gone.
It's gone.
The girl with the smile is gone for a while.
Forever. Ivan, what was the job of the lineman then, and how is it different today?
Well, back then everything was worked off of telephone poles and cross arms, and there'd be 4 or 5 arms of wire, and everything was climbing poles. Everything you have now is buried plant. Everything's under the ground. Everything's out of sight plant. Even the electric, everything's under the ground now. So it's really changed within the last 50 years. Telephone job is much easier in today's life than it was in the early days. The elements, you used to have to fight the weather, and summertime, the hot weather, and the bees, and the wasps, and the hornets, and the snakes.
Farmer's dog.
And the dogs, yes.
Well, I think the linemen still have that problem because they're with that thing sticking up there.
Pedestal?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Yeah, pedestal.
Well, they said they hate to go into there because you never know what you're going to find inside there.
That's where the snakes gather in there. It's nice and warm.
Well, things haven't changed too much.
So you open the lid and you step back because you don't know what's coming after you.
Yeah. So, is there a favorite telephone design now, or are they just, I guess, in the inner part is almost all the same?
No, it's not really the same. You know, the ringer and everything else is, electronic, where you actually had, in this type phone, you had 2 brass gongs, so to speak. When they went to this design here, this is a 302, the people liked it. It was compact,
right
the
here?
bell was mounted inside the phone. Now the one up,
What's the difference between these two?
well, this is a 202 here, and the bell and all the workings were mounted inside this. So you had to hang this on the baseboard. It took up a lot more room.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Mm-hmm. Does
And,
this one have that too?
No,
Everything
there's a
is
bell
built
and
in.
everything is built right in the,
Oh, is that where the bell was in that
The
box?
bell was
Right.
down in the box,
Uh-huh.
and that's pre-war, and the 300
This is pre-war.
pre-war, the 200 series, and that come out during the war, because you'll know that's all metal, that's cast metal there. And then plastic took over. Feel how
Very
heavy
heavy.
that is.
Yeah, very heavy.
And then
and you had better transmission qualities as, you know, as the phones progressed.
Well, what's the difference between the phone and these two then? Is that an older phone?
Not necessarily older. This is what they call a candlestick.
They called it a
Uh,
desk phone too. didn't
Yeah,
they?
desk phone. Sometimes dispatchers at the railroad stations use those along with a headset instead of the receiver.
Receiver.
these two are of the same vintage.
This one and this one.
Yes.
Mhm.
Trouble with this one, you had to hold it up to your mouth to get to the transmitter.
Oh, okay, and that one was right on. Mhm.
Yeah. The receiver in one hand, the candlestick phone in the other.
While we're talking about all these things on the table here, Dolly, I believe you have something to say about this one over here. Perhaps we can hand it to her. And she can tell us about that.
Yes, this was the end of the telephone operators. We had a cut over and went dial, and I got this from the switchboard.
Oh,
dialed
so you
out.
have your own memento then.
Yes.
Uh-huh. You all remember this?
Yeah, each girl had one of those at her position, and that's how she dialed out.
Uh-huh.
I think the phone company's still looking for this.
Don't tell them I have.
Irma, you might want to show the operator's headsets
Yes,
here,
uh-huh.
how they've varied here.
Would somebody
Ruth?
want to demonstrate them? Ruth, you're right there.
Oh,
Where's the old one?
I don't have, this is the
This
old
is the
one.
old one.
This is the one that, I don't know whether they can hear me or not.
Just speak loudly.
This is speak.
This is the one that I used when I first started.
Back at the turn of the century.
You said that. You put this over your ear, I think.
You still remember?
Oh, yes. This
Now
went
around your neck.
Oh.
Oh, I don't know.
And then it was connected to what? Oh, you
The
had
switchboard.
a switchboard.
Boy,
Then
this went
here's
around
the,
your neck like this, see?
here's the,
Here,
here it is, here then.
And
Martha,
you plug
you-
this in. You plug this into your board, and you were ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
where were we?
Isn't that neat?
Yeah, that's very interesting. While we're on this subject, I do want to thank, oh dear, what's his name? Bob Scott?
Don Scott.
Don
For
Scott
furnishing
for
all.
furnishing all these. And he has quite a collection of telephones, I understand. And he brought these down for us to see. So, Martha, what are you working with there?
Well, this was the one that we got. We thought we were real good. We didn't have to wear the chest piece, and we put it on, kept it up to our mouth, and
That's the way you work.
this one isn't.
Doesn't suit
You had to adjust. Everybody had their own
everyone had their own headpiece.
head piece, and you had to you adjusted it to suit your own head.
Anna Mae, which one did you use then, or did you use both of them? Did you
No, I
use
used this one here.
This one here?
Yes, that's the one I used.
Oh,
We used this on the Magneto for till when we first when we got ready to go over to the common battery.
Well, one of my jobs is to keep those in good repair.
What, these?
Yeah, replace the cords or the transmitter.
We kind
If,
of
one of the girls would have problems with them, they would set them aside, and when I came in the morning, I'd fix it.
Mrs. Frick, there is a delivery in the main office for you.
Okay, perhaps now we can just talk a little bit among ourselves. There's some interesting stories that you've had. Dolly, do you want to start?
Well, it's not really an interesting story, but one operator worked night turn, And I
One
had that
operator.
one operator. And we had a room there with a bed, a stove, and everything, and you could sleep, a couch and a stove, and refrigerator and all. And you could sleep in that room, and a loud bell sounded when you got a call, a real loud bell. And then you'd run out to the switchboard and answer the call. But you didn't get too many calls at night then, and you could get a lot of sleep.
Uh-huh. Martha, I'm sure you have a lot of stories you could tell.
Well, we had some very good times down there, and we had some exciting times. We had fires, and we had floods, and we had accidents, and it all kept you real busy.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe any of you want to interject in this and jog each other's memory.
Martha was the best cook
Oh, she was a good
in the
cook.
whole area. Just about every Friday at noon we'd have barbecues.
Ah. Uh-huh.
We'd go across to the little dairy bar and get chipped ham, and Martha made the sauce. And usually there were a bunch of other people just happened to stop by.
Oh, yeah. And fact is, some of the linemen and the outside men, wives would call me in the morning before I'd go to work to see if we were going to eat.
Oh.
They didn't want to pack a lunch. I got more than one call that way.
Uh-huh. And then besides, they had a hot meal.
Yeah, they had a hot meal.
Uh-huh. So,
And we had our own garden.
Yeah, they had
your
Out in the
own
back.
garden?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
in the back of the telephone
It was a
office?
small one. Tomatoes,
tomatoes and
onions, radishes,
lettuce.
Just like at home, then.
Yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh. Anna Mae, you have some nice, I think you have some stories you'd like to tell.
Well, I remember the time of the big snow when we all got snowed in and we couldn't go home.
Where did you go?
Well, we went up to the neighbor's house, to Nan McMurray's, and then some went to Charlie McMurray's home to stay at night. And Grace, that was the chief operator resident, she cooked for us. And my dad brought down a side of beef with his team of horses and the sled.
Hey, you guys ate pretty good then.
Yeah, we did. We ate real well.
Uh-huh. Who did the cooking?
Grace did.
Grace did the cooking.
She did the cooking.
Yeah. Well, did she live right there in the telephone office, or was this, or where did she?
She lived right there.
Mm-hmm. That was her home, and
that was her home.
her apartment there.
And she generally worked night turn.
Oh. Uh-huh.
And then she'd sleep in the daytime.
If you girls let her.
Yeah,
Unless
that's
some-
But they came in all kinds of way on tractors.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what form of transportation did you have to get to work? But Dolly, you probably came from where, Bridgeville?
No, I was at Hill Station then.
Hill Station?
And I was 17, and I had to find a way to work all the time, so I learned to drive in a hurry.
Uh-huh. And Martha?
Well, I learned to drive. I'm like Dolly. I learned to drive in a hurry because I had to come in by car. I lived at Center Church, and I lived in Thompsonville, and then I lived up in Bar Hill. So I had to learn to drive.
You drive to get there. Mm-hmm. Anna Mae, you've had about the neatest experiences, I think.
I came on my horse.
You rode your horse. Yeah, you rode your horse
I
to work.
rode my horse, yes. And then I put him in a barn that belonged to Will McMurray.
Oh, that was down behind the telephone office then?
To the side of the telephone
To
office.
the side there. Mm-hmm.
And then at night, if I'd worked day turn, then there'd be 2 hours in between, but you could lay down and rest on the couch if you wanted to, while the others worked. And then at night turn, there was no lights in the barn, so I had to use the flashlight to get the horse and get the halter off him and get the bridle on him.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember somebody saying you had quite an experience one time. Your horse went home and left you?
Yeah, he went home and left me.
How'd you get home?
I think my dad, or no, my husband came and got me. took me home.
Uh-huh.
But the horse knew the way home,
You knew he was home before you.
and he was home before me, yes.
Martha Matthews rode a horse too,
Oh.
and she rode it clear to Thomas,
Oh. Mhm.
clear out beyond Thomas,
Oh, yeah, they lived
clear
way
out to,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
it was way out there.
That was quite a ride.
Yeah.
Did she work night turn too?
Oh yeah, she worked night turn most of the time. She'd come in at night and then go home in the morning. She worked night turn for years.
Well, night turn was what, from 12? Or,
Sometimes it was 10 and sometimes it was 11 to 7 in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, Ruth, your turn now.
Well, I kind of remember the blackouts.
Blackouts? Oh, yes,
Blackouts.
okay.
We worked with the flashlight. And
You worked the switchboard with a flashlight.
we did. We pulled the drapes down and we used the flashlight. And we only had very few calls, but after the blackout was over, look out.
The whole board lit up.
Lit up like a Christmas tree.
So, was that during the war then? Is that what you're talking about? Mm-hmm. So, okay, Tom, your turn.
Well, I just remember the good treatment I got when I came to McMurray. Just a youngster, fresh out of the Army, the lone guy with 32 good-looking operators. I was treated royally, believe me. Martha used to help me clear trouble.
Yeah.
Being new on a job, I didn't know too much about the office equipment. And the power plant quit working one day, and Martha says, "Oh, I know how to fix that." she just went and took her fist and it started to work. Later I found out what it needed to fix it, but she kept it running. Another thing amazed me was the telephone numbers. Martha's number was number 2. They had single-digit numbers.
The operators did.
Well, in the office. The phone I used was number 1, and I think number 3 was in the power room.
What do you mean? Excuse me. What do you mean by the power room?
Well,
Was that
we
in a
talked about the old Magneto, where they used the local battery, the dry cell battery, to provide the talking battery. Well, when they went to the updated, newer office, it was called common battery. We had enormous batteries in the basement, similar to your car battery, only 8 or 9 times bigger. So there was a power plant to keep those batteries charged. And if the power plant went down, you still had 6 or 7 or 8 hours that you could operate just from the batteries. So you had to get it fixed before that time elapsed. And sometimes you may be called for help.
I know my sister, well, she worked down there also, and she told me she often wondered what was down in the basement. She was always afraid to go down and see that.
The ringing machine was down there, and the batteries. And some of the subscribers had single-digit numbers.
That would mean like a private phone or something then? Or
4, 5, 6.
Was that mostly businesses then?
Yes.
Or,
There weren't too many businesses at that
yeah,
time.
right.
The Murray Supply was about the only one. It was the big one. And
a couple of them were located out on Route 19.
And Hill Station, the mine down at Hill Station.
Yeah, well, Ivan, you were telling me something about the area that the McMurray Bell covered. Perhaps you'd like to tell
It had a big area. It was from here clear to Thomas and Muntown and over on to 19 and down to West McMurray Road. And the McMurray Exchange was a big exchange. To go back to the question there, when they were saying number 1 and number 2, all you used to do is ask the operator, give me number 1, and that was a phone. And generally, as the phones went in, it was 1, 2, 3, and so you could always tell who had the first phones. And as Tom said, 1, 2, and 3 was in the telephone company. And then as the people would get their phone put in, they got 4, 5, 6, and it went up like that. And that always amazed me. I always would know who was the first early people of the area by their phone number. But the telephone companies changed a lot down through the years. The McMurray Exchange was a rural area, but if you could see it now, it's all residential, all built up.
Yeah. Oh, a lot more phones in now than what there used to be. A whole lot more.
One operator couldn't handle it at night now.
No, I think there's a lot more night calls now than what there used to be.
I think there's around 15,000 lines in McMurray now.
15,000?
Mhm.
Wow.
Each exchange, like we have 941 now, we used to have Wilson, and 941 will cover 10,000 combination of numbers from 000 to 999, makes 10,000 different numbers.
You've got 942 now.
942 we had to go to because, and then as soon as we go over 20,000, we'll have to go to another exchange.
Oh, is that how they do that then?
That's how that works. An exchange will only handle 10,000 combination of numbers.
Well, there was something said about the 800 number being all filled up very shortly. Have you gentlemen heard about that? In today's world?
Well, in today's world, it's the 800 number. In other words, the owner or the company pays for the call. When you call an 800 number, they accept the charges rather than you pay for the long distance charge. They pay that.
Okay, anybody else have anything that they want to add to this? Martha,
Well,
I'm
I
sure
think
you
there
have
was many
something.
stories that we can tell. I think what stands out most, I worked the day that the war was declared in Europe, and that was one of the biggest mistakes the telephone company ever made, because they had every girl in the office that day, and there was no calls. People were just, they just didn't do anything. They didn't know what to do, and they did nothing. And they made no calls. There was nothing. You just sit there and all day and did nothing that day. And then, of course, I worked the day that President Roosevelt died. That was really everybody. I think everybody in the township at that time called on the telephone in about 45 minutes. And then VJ Day. VJ Day, I didn't work. I sneaked off. I said I had worked all the other days. I was going to sneak off that day.
So someone else took your place then.
Well, it was, I wasn't supposed to be working at the time anyway, so, but they had plenty of people to work, but I was called, but I wasn't at home.
Oh. Now, there is one thing I'd like to know is when you become an operator, and at what period of training? Do you remember, Ruth, what you had?
Couple of days.
Yeah, that was on.
And that's what they just showed you how to operate the switchboard? Is that what it was?
But when we went over to the other board, we got
3 days.
oh no, you got more than that. We went to Canonsburg and was trained, because you had to learn all those combinations of numbers. You had 100 numbers, and then you had to learn all the combinations.
For 100 numbers?
For 100 numbers,
What combinations?
Well, you had a block of 100 numbers,
Yeah.
and then each block was numbered, like 100 block, 200 block, 300 block, 400 block.
And would they go from 1 to 99 then?
They'd go from 1 to 99.
Each block.
Each block.
Mm-hmm.
And we got and you had no numbers. There was no numbers on it. That's why you had to memorize every one of those numbers. You had to know where each one of those numbers was.
What do you mean there was no numbers? No numbers on the switchboard?
No numbers on the switchboard, no.
You had to know which
Only
which one.
on the block number. The block number, like block number was 100. That was on there. But the rest of them was, there was no numbers. If your number was 104, you had to know where 104 was. You had to know that. You had to memorize that.
You're talking about those little holes that you plug in?
Yeah,
Well, I think they were designated 0 to 19, right?
Well,
20.
each row had so many in.
Mhm.
Each row had, in the 100, had so many in. And then when we started, we had the 100 block.
Well, you'd have to know where to push that, if the light came on, then is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you had to know what number that was. You had to memorize that, what number that was. You had to know where that number was.
And then to place the call then somewhere else, you'd have another number?
Yeah, then you had to find another number.
It's not as simple as I thought.
It got, when we were with the old Magneto, you had them on the flaps, the little flaps that fell down. The numbers were all on them, and you had no problems. But when we went to the common battery, you had to memorize each. But if you memorized one block, you were all right.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean by flaps?
Well, when you called in, when he rang that telephone
back
up
here?
there,
Yeah.
there was a little flap on the switchboard that fell down.
Oh, and that's how you knew that.
And that's how we knew that the, yes. Then when we went to the common battery, we had a light to come on.
Now, when they were making toll calls, you knew if it was coming like from 6521, but you couldn't tell the ring. And there were several rings. So you'd write this all down on a little pad. So you'd ask what ring they had, so you'd know who to charge it to. You had no way of telling that.
I see. You mean like your party line ring? And that.
Yeah.
So, but if somebody called on the party line and that, it wouldn't go through the office. I mean, you didn't, or did you know when someone was using that phone or
Yeah,
something?
the common battery, you had to go through. When we went to common battery, we had to ring for them. If you wanted the other party on your line, we had to ring it for them. They had to hang up. We said, will you hang
Right.
up, please? And then we would ring it. But where...
But I mean, like whenever before that you used to ring along in two shorts, say.
well,
Would-
we did
Would
the
you
same
know
thing.
in the office?
Huh?
Would you know in the office that that phone was in use?
Yes.
Oh, you did know?
Oh, yes, because it would come in.
Oh.
It would come in, and we'd have to plug it up so that we didn't go in over it to ring for somebody else. We would plug it up with one cord.
Well, I learned something.
But and then we had to do the same with the common battery on the rural lines when we had rural lines. I don't think they even have rural lines anymore, do they?
They don't even have two-party lines
No, I
anymore.
think they're
Very
all-
few two parties. Everybody has everybody wants privacy.
Privacy.
Yeah. But we had them out. We out around Thomas and down Venetia Way and all around because it cost too much money for you to have a private line. If it got to, it was
You
mileage
paid
like
so much,
a mile.
I
Or,
think it was 50 cents every quarter of a mile.
yeah.
So over and above the your monthly charge, you had, say, $2 for every mile to get a private line.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fairly expensive.
It was expensive to have a private line in those days. Of course, you didn't have on a rural line. You didn't have to pay anything, and it was so much less on a party line too, or a four-party. You had a four-party line, and that was, or you had a two-party line. You had a two-party line, or you had a four-party line.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember a long time ago we had a neighbor. She was an invalid, and well, if you wanted to know anything, you just asked her. He used to ring the neighbors up and everything. I mean, you didn't have to worry. You know, if you wanted to know anything, you just called her and she could tell you all. So, well, does anybody have anything else they'd like to say about the telephone company?
I think it was nice to reminisce the old times. They're gone, not forgotten, but they'll never return. But
that's why we have it on tape here.
that's why we have it on tape, and we can see it maybe in years to come. But I imagine the modern generation, if they see telephones like that, they'll say, "What is that?" What?
Yeah, what is that thing?
We had such good times, too. We had hay rides and wheater roasts, sleigh rides, and we were a
like a
close group.
family.
We were a close group.
And I'll tell you one thing. You say that the telephone company was good to you. When you worked for the telephone company, you had it good because they had all kind of insurance. You had your paid days off and so on and so forth, and they treated you real good. In fact, the girls, they had a hospital or a rest home, I guess you call it, I don't know, out somewhere around Harrisburg, and if you got worn out, why, the company would send you there for week, 2 weeks, and didn't cost you a cent.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
So they treated you pretty good in those days.
Really was Ma Bell.
Yeah,
Ma
it really
Bell,
was.
right.
It was Ma Bell.
Right. Well, I remember when I worked in Pittsburgh, at first I was very angry about making me buy a bond every payday and that, but not touching those bonds or anything, I was able to pay for both my children's weddings just by collecting those bonds.
Mm-hmm.
So it does help to save.
I remember the old linemen back during the Depression. The AT&T stock was forced on them. They say, well, we'll give you $10, but you have to take half of that in AT&T stock, and that was forced on them. And there was a lineman in Washington. He had more in stock and got more in dividends than he did in wages, and all that was forced on him.
That was forced on him.
Hey, that stock is pretty nice right now.
Martha will tell you about that.
I still have a lot of it. And
Yeah, it was a very nice company to work for, and even in the office, I mean, everybody was very close. I mean, we like you girls did. You had your parties and everything too, and your good times, and we had them too in the office, and it just seemed like there was just something there, like Tom said, Ma Bell.
It was one big happy family.
one big family.
So
So it was real nice. We worked and we had a good time, and we took a lot. We took a lot too. Believe me.
well, I'm sure you did. I mean, not everybody is very congenial. So when
But,
they want that telephone, they want the telephone.
Yeah, but it was a nice place to work.
Yeah, I'm going to hate to see the building gone and that, but
It was nice to know if you were clear out on the fringes of the exchange, snowstorms, you could, once you got to a phone, you were going to get a voice on the other end.
right.
A lot of times, especially Martha, she could tell you where everybody lived in this. If you were lost, she could straighten you up.
I'm afraid we pulled some awful. We had 2 young fellows that come down there when we went from the Magneto to the
Common battery.
Common Battery. We said they took all the old cranks out of McMurray, and these 2 young boys went out and they done some kind of a wiring that wired it so they would work on both the Common Battery and the Magneto. And we got them out there one time. They go way out beyond Thomas someplace, and it was getting late. It was getting dark, and we said, "Aren't you coming in?" And they said, "No, we have so much to do." And so we told them there was Indians out there. They better come out. The next day, we got a gone over from their boss. The boys came in. They were scared. They came in.
That's whenever there was a lot of woods and everything around.
Yeah, there was no houses out there, you know, and they were scared to death. They were scared to death out there, and then we told them there was Indians out there. Peters Township Indians.
Peters Township Indians.
That's
right.
where they got its name, Peters Township Indians.
Right.
Martha gave them their name.
No, I'm afraid not.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming, and again, I'll introduce my guest is Ivan Forgy, Tom Milligon, Ruth Stoltz, Mae McMurray, Martha Latimore, and Dolly Wolf Gorcello. After the program's over, I'll remember your name. So, thank you all very much, and this is Erma Grego from Senior Perspective.